rights. And I commend him for that. And I think that in a lot of ways, you need more of these types of players who speak up for players' rights. And obviously, the NHL does have kind of a dark history in this regard. We know the Steve Montador story, all the former enforcers who suffered CTE and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So I do respect what Lehner is trying to do, and he himself struggles with mental illness. He has publicly said that he is bipolar. But I think that in this particular case, maybe he got a bit ahead of himself, made some serious accusations that he walked back. And it's kind of cooled down now. Alain Vigneault has flat out denied these allegations, but I mean, it is a sticky situation that looked worse 48 hours ago, but still now, even though the clouds are beginning to clear, still a bit shady, if you ask me.
Yeah, it's a little weird, to say the very least. I mean, now there are more people that actually are coming out as well defending Alain Vigneault. I don't know if you've heard about this, but Maxime Lapierre also came out and said, while he was playing under Vigneault for both in Vancouver and as well in St. John, New Brunswick, he never saw anything of a sort. He never saw Vigneault being coming out as a monster, like you said, and being like, yeah, take these pills, buddy. Blah, blah, blah. Like it never happened. He was saying like, dude, you had like a sprained ankle. You had to go to the doctor and get a prescription. It wasn't an open pharmacy. Now at the same time, the NHL has openly said that they invited Robin Lehner to be part of course, now an open investigation into this whole allegation. Chuck Fletcher as well came out and saying, yeah, all this is BS. But I mean, we haven't heard from Nolan Patrick yet to begin with, and you've had some inside news recently about Nolan Patrick. You mentioned a couple of weeks ago when we actually had you as a guest saying that, okay, there were some issues between Patrick and the organization, but the fact that Lehner kind of just comes out of left field defending him is kind of strange in a way, because they don't know each other, and Lehner has never played for Vigneault. So I mean, is it just hearsay at this point, or do you actually believe that, hey, there might be actually more than meets the eye?
Well, look, my first thought was, well, Nolan Patrick had an unceremonious divorce from the Philadelphia Flyers. He's now with the Vegas Golden Knights. Lehner obviously has an issue with Alain Vigneault, and I just put two and two together. Now, this kid, Drew Wheeler, directly said Nolan Patrick's name, and he's the only one that has mentioned Nolan Patrick's name directly in this particular instance. Yeah. And even Lehner responded to this kid and said, BS, this isn't the case. If I had to speculate, and I have no inside knowledge on this, I didn't even want to text my sources because it's not something I want to get involved with, I would say that Nolan Patrick has had some very bad things to say about the Philadelphia Flyers, including Alain Vigneault, and Lehner kind of took that and ran with it. Now, is that true? Who knows? I could tell you that there is a lot more to what happened with Nolan Patrick than we were led to believe in the public sphere. We were said that he had a migraine issue. Patrick himself has since said it was concussions. I can tell you that Nolan Patrick's issues with the Philadelphia Flyers go all the way back to when Chuck Fletcher traded Dale Weiss back in the winter of 2019 back to the Montreal Canadiens. Weiss and Nolan Patrick were very good friends, and that did not sit well with Patrick. Patrick did not want to be with the Philadelphia Flyers last year. He was holding out hope that they would have traded him to the Winnipeg Jets last offseason in hopes in a deal with Patrick Laine. And ultimately, they got his wish, or he got his wish, and the Flyers didn't move on from him. And now he's in a place with some familiarity with Kelly McCrimmon. So, I mean, Lehner never mentioned Patrick's name specifically. Patrick's name, I think, only came up with me because I was just connecting the dots. But then you have this kid, Drew Wheeler, who has since admitted that it was inaccurate. So maybe this guy, Drew Wheeler, thought the same of me, took it as an opportunity to say he had a source when he actually didn't, and then was hoping that it would ultimately come to be true. Who knows, right? I think typically where there's smoke, there's fire. I don't think Lehner was making this up out of thin air. But I could also tell you that Lehner was on the Spit and Chicklets podcast last week, and he said that he had an interview with the team in 2019, and the coach was, for lack of a better term, a piece of you-know-what, and while the GM was awesome. I could tell you that the Flyers were exploring goaltending options that summer to back up Carter Hart. So was it the Philadelphia Flyers? Was that experience with Alain Vigneault? He said the coach is still coaching in this league. So, I mean, I think it's a combination of things. It's probably somewhere in the middle of this whole entire mess. But, I mean, Blenner has walked back his comments. The kid Drew Wheeler has walked back his comments, even though they weren't really legitimate in the first place. So I think at the end of the day, I do believe it kind of comes down to Nolan Patrick in some way. But again, am I right? Who knows? It's all speculation.
Exactly. And I'm gonna play doctor for 2 seconds. I actually took a little time to look this up. The medication we were talking about at the beginning. The first one is called Ambien, which is a generic name for Zolpidem. Which it's used to treat sleep disorders, mostly insomnia in adults, which could be something that most athletes in North America could be attributed to because of the constant time zone changes and everything. The other one, the one that a lot of people have trouble pronouncing, called benzodiazepine.
There you go.
There you
what
go.
He said.
I think sometimes called benzos. I like that one instead. You know what the actual name is?
What is it?
Familiar names include Valium and Xanax.
Wow. Okay.
See. So it's already. So it makes this whole story even more ambiguous and more weird to begin with. So, I guess it's gonna be a to be continued part of this segment.
Yeah.
Anthony, let's move on to the West Coast, to the West Side. Let's go to Vancouver. Vancouver Canucks have recently announced the signing of Elias Pettersson, a 3-year deal worth $7.35 million a year, and Quinn Hughes has signed as well for 6 years at a whopping $7.85 million a year. Now, you already know my thoughts about signing young players at such crazy contracts, but you know what? I just have to get over that. But I'm curious to know, what do you think about those deals?
Well, I'll start with the Hughes one because it was very long-term. I've never been a huge fan of Quinn Hughes. I've thought he's been a touch overrated during his time in the NHL. And last year, without Chris Tanev, he was flat out bad for the Vancouver Canucks. Like, he was flat out bad and did not have a good season by any stretch. But again, I acknowledge and recognize the talent that he has. And there's not a lot of defensemen, especially at the age of 21, that can do what Quinn Hughes does on a nightly basis.
Yeah, because he's your prototypical offensive defenseman. He's the modern day Paul Coffey, so to speak, right? He'll literally just take the offense in his own hands and just run with it. But defensively, he's such a liability, though. That's the only thing.
And you saw that with Chris Tanev leave. And you see that a lot with young defensemen. Like, I witnessed it firsthand with the Flyers last year. Ivan Provorov was one of the best defensemen in the NHL in 2019-20. Matt Niskanen retires, and it becomes a tire fire. Yep. I think having a veteran defenseman with a young star in the making is just invaluable. I think it's just absolutely quintessential to have. And I think you've seen that even in other instances. Like, look at all of the young defensemen that Boston brought along with Zdeno Chara at their side. He did it with Charlie McAvoy. He did it with Brandon Carlo. Now you see him going on to the island. You assume he's going to do it with Noah Dobson. We talked about that a few weeks ago. So, I mean, look, they're taking a bit of a risk here with Quinn Hughes, but you get him at 6 years. So there is cost certainty. It's going to take him right. Pardon me?
I said there's at least that, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a bit rich, $7.85 million for Quinn Hughes. And I look again, obviously I know this firsthand, Ivan Provorov, who got 6 years at $6.75 million. So I think that's a steal. But then when you look at what defensemen we're getting this summer, like Darnell Nurse got north of $9 million, Dougie Hamilton got $9 million. Yeah. I just think that that's kind of the going rate now for these types of number one defensemen. And look, they have 2 defensemen now tied up on contracts making north of $7 million for the foreseeable future, Oliver Ekman-Larsson being the other one.
Yeah.
And I kind of worry, like, who's going to be the long-term partner for Quinn Hughes on that blue line. Like, unless you're playing Ekman-Larsson on his offside, the guy that jumps out to me right away is Tyler Myers. But is Tyler Myers like the steadying partner you want for a young Quinn Hughes? Is it Travis Hamonic? I don't know. We'll see. But I mean, it's obviously good from the part that you get cost certainty, but you are paying him just shy of $8 million and he's already 21 years old. Now you get to Elias Pettersson, and this is where it gets pretty sticky, right? Because Elias Pettersson, to me, yes, he had an injury-riddled season last year. He wasn't as good as you would have thought. I thought going into last year he was a top 10 center in the NHL, not so much following last year.
Yeah.
But you lock him in at $7.35 million. If I'm not mistaken, his qualifying offer in the summer of 2024 is going to be $8.8 million.
Something like that, yeah.
And he's going to be a year away from UFA. And when players get that close to UFA, especially at that age, are they really going to want to lock in long term? And that's the thing that I'm a bit scared with here, that you're going to get a qualifying offer. Pettersson's only going to want to get 1 year. And it also depends where the Canucks are at that time. But are you just going to walk Elias Pettersson right to UFA here? And I know that the flip side of that was, well, if you want to get him at 6, 7, 8 years, you're going to be paying him $9 million. And you want to save in salary cap space in the short term, and the Canucks are just always right up against the salary cap. Probably one of the reasons why people were up in arms trying to figure out why the hell they acquired Oliver Ekman-Larsson or re-signed Tanner Pearson or all these guys. But at the same time, I can understand it. But then if that's what your end goal is, you better be going in all in right now. And do the Canucks scream like a cup contender to me?
Nope.
No, I think they're a good team. I think that they're better than what they showed last year, but I don't think that they're going to win a cup. Maybe they'll go deep because the Pacific Division is so weak. But I mean, I think there's risk in both deals, but for opposite reasons, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing with Pettersson, though, is that you're looking at a guy who averages a point a game, or very close to as well. And I guess there's also that kind of like, okay, it's not it. I think you absolutely nailed it, Anthony, when you were saying that, you're looking long term with the cap, with the salary cap, and also the contracts that are locked in and everything. Because if you're looking at stats in 3 years, this is only his 4th year in the NHL, by the way. He's only 22 years old. It's absolutely ridiculous. And he's got, I'm looking at Hockey DB right now, 66 points in 71 games in his rookie season, 66 points, 68 games. And then last year, even though he was injured, he still managed 21 points in 26 games. So 153 points in 165 career games is absolutely ridiculous. Is it worth $7.5 million a year? In this case, yeah. In today's modern NHL, it's what it's worth. But like you said, this is someone who, if we were to offer him a long-term contract, this is $8.5, $9 million a year. And again, there's that risk as well. If he continues on that same stability, maybe you can convince him, being like, all right, here, take $9 million, we'll give an extra year or whatever. Or he might explode even further, and the next thing you know, he's being paid $10 million a year or whatnot, right? So just to wrap things up again, I can't deny anything you just said, Anthony. I mean, like, you got two cornerstone players, and Hughes and Pettersson, who are essentially the present and the future of the Vancouver Canucks, and a comparable could be, to a lesser extent, Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki in Montreal. If Caulfield explodes and becomes the player he's supposed to be, that's going to be expensive. And then there's also Nick Suzuki you need to re-sign now. He's going to be someone who could be, a comparable as well in terms of like what the next contract negotiations.
Well, that's the whole thing, right? And I love Pettersson, and that, for that matter, I love Nick Suzuki. So I was a bit confused that they decided to bridge Pettersson, but I mean, you see that with a lot of young centers nowadays. Like they did it with Barzal in Long Island. They did it with Braden Point down in Tampa. So it's hard to really commit, $9-10+ million to a center who's not even 23 yet. So I understand it. For me, maybe it's just me. I've never been really enamored with Quinn Hughes. Like if you ask me, you could have Quinn Hughes or Charlie McAvoy. I take Charlie McAvoy. I don't think about it twice. If you could take Quinn Hughes or Miro Heiskanen, I take Miro Heiskanen without even thinking about it. The way I think about it is that your number one defenseman has to be able to play the penalty kill very well. Mm-hmm. That's the way I think about it. I know that the way defensemen are viewed has changed over the last few years, but maybe I'm just an old school guy. I'm a dinosaur in that regard, but I've just never been as big of a fan as Quinn Hughes as most people have. So that's why I'm kind of skeptical with his contract.
I think we're just